Join. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Recognize and Manage Your Level of Crazy with EQ. And today we're going to talk about a very interesting but important topic, which many people are experiencing out in the world today, which is single parenting. And so today we have a beautiful, lovely guest with us. Her name is Vicki Poole. And I'm going to share her bio with you. So just give me a quick second here as I read it to you. She is a phenomenal individual. So Vicki is a native Georgia peach with 2 adult children and 2 cats. She is a certified health and life coach, master transformational coach, hypnotist, published author, and speaker. And her business is the Enlightened Peach, where she helps women stop dieting and start eating to thrive while gaining confidence, joy, and peace. And also, Vicki has a podcast, which is called Today's Dream, Tomorrow's Reality, where she helps people tell their amazing stories of resilience, transformation, as well as how to live a mosaic life. And I know that I had the privilege of being on that podcast just recently, and we had a fabulous time. So I invited Vicki to join here so that we can have a beautiful conversation about life and level of crazy and same. So before we jump straight into the conversation, just a reminder that this platform is dedicated to the awareness, education, and practice of emotional intelligence. And so everything that we do here is for that reason. And it's also just a reminder, these videos are sponsored by the EQ Institute and Florida Balance Centers, where we specialize in inner ear conditions, so vertigo, balance, dizziness, and pain management issues, where we help with acupuncture. So let's get into it. So excited to have you, Vicki.
It's wonderful to be here. Good to see you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So let's get into it, shall we? So let's talk about your work for a second. I wanted to ask you right off the gate, who was the most interesting character that you've had on your show to date?
On the podcast?
Yes.
Oh gosh. Well, there's 2 that pop in my mind really quick. I'll share both of them briefly. One is a gentleman that he is actually a romance novel book cover model.
Oh.
Yes, but he's also a regular guy. He's got 3 kids, he's married, and he has a day job and all these things. And it's almost like he was so intriguing because it's almost like he has 2 separate lives and they kind of intersect every now and then. So it's really, really intriguing. So I love that. And then I have another guest who I've done actually a couple of podcasts with her. And she had a lot of sexual trauma as a young child, beginning at the age of 4. And she developed multiple personalities because of that. And so it's talking to her about what she endured and how these personalities started and how that's playing out in her life. And now she's actually a fertility coach because she says that a lot of infertility comes from womb trauma and mindset. And so she works with people with that. So she's very, very intriguing. And if I can just add one little nuance that was really, really enlightening when I did the recent podcast, I just started using a new AI material so that you can put your podcast in the video and everything into this AI, and it'll give you a transcript. It'll give you all kinds of information about the podcast. And so when it gives you the transcript, it says Vicki speaks. Then it would say your name and that you speak. And when I went back after I recorded hers, and this is our second recording, it had an extra speaker in there. And it was like, well, that's interesting. So I started looking, and it's like it would speak and then she would finish the sentence. And so I messaged her and said, hey, do you have a minute to talk? And so I got on the phone with her, and she said that it was one of her personalities, because it's very undetectable to me when I'm talking to her and I'm watching, but I don't know her that well. But the AI could detect a difference in tone, a difference in speech. And once I really looked at it, there was one section that looking at it in the written word, that one section actually did change drastically in the way the person spoke. And it was one of her personalities. So I thought that was very intriguing to discover, that the AI could actually see the difference in this personality popping in.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
That's very interesting. And that's a whole other, if I shall say this, right, level of crazy, right? I know that when I use these terms, the people that really understand what this movement is about, it's really about keeping things light. But, because we all have a level of crazy, I think at this point it's okay to say, that's a whole other level. But, that also, in a way, helps her manage her life.
Yes.
And so in a way, it's exactly right on. It's how do you recognize and manage your level of crazy?
Yes, yes.
And if you have to manage it, you have to have these personalities. And to be honest with you, I mean, I know that many of us are not officially diagnosed with these things, but I will tell you that I have different personalities, and I'm sure that we all do, but sometimes those of us that maybe don't feel safe talking about it, or maybe we think that it's, we want to keep it under wraps, or we do think that maybe it's more serious than really it is. I don't know. I have all kinds of different personalities, and they help me do what I have to do in the world. And
yeah, the same with me. It was like when I was speaking to her the last time, I told her, I said, when I'm working with clients, a lot of times we do shadow work, because we have that voice in our head that says, well, part of me wants to do this and part of me wants to do that. And I said, I don't know if it's anything close to the same thing. She said, well, to be honest with you, she said, it's very similar. She said that we all have little broken pieces that have helped us, as something has gone on in our lives. And she said that the amount of people that were diagnosed, there was so many more people that had that, but it didn't seem to take over or, filter in as much as somebody that's had the trauma that she has.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and not to, how do I say, not to minimize anyone's condition, but I think in a world where we have tried to make industry of everything, I think a lot of times we do over label, and we do want to identify things so that we can prescribe this and we can prescribe that, and we can now have all these, and we talked about it on when I was on your show, all of that. And so so I think if this conversation can really just kind of give someone a feeling of, what, if I'm a little silly sometimes, and if I have these moments of where I'm feeling like I'm a little, a little over here or a little over here, it's okay. You know what I mean?
Right. That's
You're
right.
probably fine. You have a little bit, level of crazy going on in a healthy way. And if it's more than that, I'm sure that you will know, and I'm speaking to the, to the audience now, you will know, and your family will know when something is really off, that you got to go get diagnosed and medication and this and that. But for the most part, we all have a level of crazy that is, it's fine.
Yes. And one of the things I will share is that when I had her on my podcast, she had never publicly spoke about all this. because, you know, she didn't want to upset family or different things, because she was actually trafficked by family members. And so the interesting thing was, when she first did the recording, she messaged me a day later and she said, I don't think I feel comfortable with putting this out. And I said, well, I've already put it out, but I'm sure the people you know won't all of a sudden start following me and get this information. So I said, if you don't want to do anything with it right now, you don't have to. And it took her a week or so to decide that, yes, she said, I'm okay with it now. So then she agreed to come on again. And she said that by getting on and sharing her story, it gave her more power over all the stuff that was going on. And so I think that's one of the things that's great about these platforms, is that when you can share your story, and it not only helps other people, but it actually helps you to find that power within yourself and realize how you've overcome or the things that you've done.
Yeah. And so I think that's mainly why, and tell me if I'm right or wrong here, that's mainly why you do your show, is because you really love to hear people's stories, and you really want to show how people have gone through such trauma. And maybe it's good stuff, maybe it's bad stuff, but you just want to share people's stories. It enlightens me, it enlightens the viewers, enlightens yourself. And it's kind of a win all around, right?
Right. And the thing that has been really so gratifying to me is that when people are sharing their stories, you can see how, and there's even some of them that will say, as bad as that was, I wouldn't change a thing. Going through that created this new avenue of my life. And so that's where that mosaic life comes in. And I think the more we can celebrate the things that we feel were challenges or something bad that happened, the more we can celebrate the fact that we went through that and we learned and we became somebody different because of those things, that we never would have been able to show up in life right now like we are if we hadn't had those things. So I love, especially when, you know, even some of them are like, there's little changes, or not little changes, but big changes, but maybe it wasn't a catastrophe, you know, that people went through. And some of them, it's huge catastrophes. So I just love learning about new people and their stories, and being able to share it like this as a conversation and not as a interview, you know, kind of thing.
Right. You know, what you say is so powerful, because it really goes back to the conversation about why are we here, right? That spiritual conversation that, you know, many people may not always understand or don't want to admit that exists, is that we're not just here to pay the bills. You know, we're not just here to fight with our neighbors over politics. You know, there's a bigger picture going on. And, you know, when we can really, I guess, accept and understand that we're here for a bigger mission, in terms of our soul, right? And that our soul came down to correct and to learn the lessons. And once those lessons are learned, then we go to the next level. And some people may not believe in reincarnation, and that's okay. But for those of us that do, you know, we do believe that the more higher you go, the less you have to do in the next one. You know, and ultimately we will all return home and clean up the mess that we created, you know, because we technically were never supposed to come down here. It was never supposed to be such a hot mess, but here it is. And so, all right, we'll keep working on it, right?
Right.
So let's get into more of the conversation regarding parenting. So I want to hear your story give us from the background of where you began your single parent journey, and take us in from that, and you know, share whatever you need to share, like the backstory, and then we'll keep going from there.
Okay. Well, actually, I've been a single parent twice, but I'm going to go with the second one. And I had I had a child that was 7 and a daughter that was 7 and a son that was 16 when their father tragically passed away from a massive heart attack. He was only, let's see, all of a sudden it's just the age just went right out of my damn mind.
That's okay.
I'm trying to think, how old was he when we got married? So I think he was 41 when he passed. 39, 41, something like that.
It's young.
And he had he was a great dad. He had actually had his first heart attack at 39, so he was 41. He had a heart attack at 39, and he survived that heart attack and started taking better care of himself. He started going to fishing to relax. He started going and walking, and he quit eating fast food, and he did all the things that the doctors told him to do. And he did very well with that, and he had stopped smoking. And then suddenly I noticed that he would smell like cigarettes when he came in, and I would think, well, why would he start smoking again? And then I asked him about it, and he said that he decided that he was so wanting a cigarette that he wasn't going to resist it anymore. So that was kind of the beginning of the downfall of his health again. And I didn't realize the extent. And when I got a phone call, I was at work one day, and at that time I was just a full-time hairstylist. I wasn't coaching or anything. And I got a phone call that he had had another heart attack. And so the ambulance was rushing him to the hospital. And at that time, I will be honest, we had actually split up. We had gotten a divorce, and after the first year of divorce, we actually started reconnecting, and we started dating. When I didn't have the kids, we would date, and we were trying to reconnect. And he kept wanting to get married again, and I kept saying, well, we can't do it until we work through all of our stuff, because we date really well. And when we first get married, we do really well, but all the things that broke us apart are still there, and we haven't corrected those or worked through them. And I can't do it to the kids a second time. So I said, let's just keep working on this. And so when I got that phone call that he had had this heart attack, I get in the car and I bargained with God all the way to the hospital. Okay, God, if you'll just let him live, I'll get off the fence. We'll go ahead and get remarried. We'll do all these things that we've been talking about. And I've been keeping it at bay, right? And I did that all the way to the hospital. On the way to the hospital, I had to stop and pick up my teenage son, my 16-year-old son, to take him to the hospital. He was in school. And so we get to the hospital, and his family is there, some of my family's there, and I have my son there. And my daughter was still at school, so I had made arrangements for a friend to pick her up after school and take her to her house. And because, like I said, she was only 7. And so we're all talking, and we're thinking, since they haven't told us anything, he must be doing okay. And we had this one nurse that popped in and said, I just wanted to let you know that the doctor will be in to talk to you in just a minute. And her inflection went up, which you think is a good thing, right? Mm-hmm. So we said, oh, wow, she sounded really positive, everything's going to be fine. Well, this doctor walked in, and she looked at us, she looked around the room, and she said, I just wanted to tell you that Gary died. What the fuck? My son, all of a sudden, he lets out this blood-curdling scream, because really, since he had had that first heart attack, I just knew this one was going to be fine. And especially with the way they were acting, it just felt like, yeah, he's doing good. No. So it was, and it even has my heart pumping a little bit just talking about it right now. I said I wasn't going to cry, but that's the way it is. It's been a long time. Because now my daughter is 29. So it's been 22 years since he passed away. And even today, it still gets me. And there are days that I think a lot about him. And so anyway, he passed December 17th. And so I had to try to do everything I could to make things feel better for the kids. I mean, I wanted them to know that he wasn't there, but I didn't want it to be where they couldn't have Christmas. They couldn't have good feelings, because the one thing that I noticed in myself was that once he passed, I felt guilty if I laughed at a joke, or I felt guilty if suddenly I realized I was listening to the birds and it made me happy. I felt guilty. And there was so much of that in me. And I think a lot of it's because, like I said, I had been the one that was holding us back from, we can't get married. Now, granted, I know now that it was the right thing, because hell, we might have been fighting that day,
Right.
and that happened. And then I would have a guilt of a whole different level. And, things happen the way they're supposed to. So that was my journey to becoming a single parent again. And it was, luckily I had friends and family around me to rally. But I will say, one of the hardest things I have ever done in my life was when they brought my daughter home that day, and I had to tell her that her father passed. That was so fucking hard. So she comes in and she just notices that there's a bunch of people in the room, and she comes over, and I said, come on, baby, you need to sit in my lap. And she sat in my lap. And I said, and that day she was supposed to, it happened on a Friday, and she was supposed to be going and spending the night with one of her cheerleader friends, or Girl Scout friends. I don't even remember. But anyway, she sat in my lap and she said, why is everybody here? And I said, well, baby, I said, I really don't know how to tell you this. I said, but your daddy died today. And she looked at me, and then she put her head on my shoulder, and she cried for just a very short period of time. And then she raised up and she looked at me. She said, can I still go spend the night at her house? And I said, yes. And so it was like, I don't know what the hell to do here.
Right.
So she did. She went to spend the night. And the thing that happened, and I know I'm not talking just about the the single parenting part, but
No,
I feel like this is an important thing. But when she was spending the night, this little girl's dad was sitting in a chair watching TV. And Haley and this little girl were playing, and she stopped playing with her and went and sat in her dad's lap. And she looked at him and she said, my daddy died today. And he said, I know, sweetie. And she said, okay. And then she just got up and ran off. And they called me later to tell me that had happened, and said that Joe, the dad, had to actually go to the bedroom and collect himself after, because it was like,
right.
So I put both of them in grief counseling and all that stuff. And I took grief counseling. And the thing about there not being another parent there, even if you're divorced, the other parent is there, that if you have to make a decision or something, there is somebody that you can bounce that off of. And on the other hand, there's also a parent that you have to argue with about the things that you want to do, right? So not that it was good that he passed, but I didn't have that sounding board. But that also didn't have that argument over decisions. But that also meant every friggin' decision that was made was all mine, all the time. And that was a very difficult place to be too.
Let me ask you, I have two questions here and I don't want to forget them. So
Okay.
The first question is that how did, what's your daughter's name?
Haley.
Haley. So, you know, it seems like she was young and innocent and didn't really process emotionally what was going on. So my first question is, as time went on, how did she cope with that? And did she ever actually stop and get like, whoa, like shocked about it? Or was she always very light about it? That's number one. And the second question here is, what was the most important lesson that you had to learn as a single parent? So let's talk about Haley first, and then we'll talk
Okay.
about the second one.
Well, like I said, she was 7 when he passed, and we did do the grief counseling, but it wasn't like the way the grief counselor explained it to me was he said that we have different levels of ability to understand at different ages. So he said that she was still like separated from the stuff that was going on at that age.
Mm-hmm.
And then as she would get older, she would have different times that something would come up that she would be really agitated or upset or very emotional, and she wouldn't connect it to the fact that it was this, but that would be the connection. And he said, especially like big events, like when she graduated from high school, when she graduated from kindergarten, when she, these different things that would trigger that in her. And one of the things that I found was she was also triggered, even though she didn't remember the date that he died. She would every year when it got close to that time, it was like her body knew, and she would get very, very emotional. Sometimes she would get like very agitated with you, and I had to just take that with grace and recognize that I knew that's what was happening. And as she got a little bit older, we talked about that. But and one of the things that I did do with her, I tried as best I could, was he was really big on sunsets. I mean, he loved the sunsets. Not that I don't, but it was like we lived not far from the lake. And sometimes I'd be right in the middle of dinner and he would come in and he'd say, "There's a beautiful sunset." I'd have to turn everything off. We would get in the car, we'd go to the lake, we'd watch the sunset, then we'd come back and I would finish dinner. That's how important they were to him. So every time we would see a sunset, I would make sure I said, "There's a beautiful sunset. Your daddy would love that. I bet that's him looking down and shining on us." And so that got to be our thing. And so that was the way for me to at least keep reminding her, that there was a beauty about him, because at her age, she might not remember a lot. And so I would remind her sometimes about certain things about him. And I did save, like, back then, we had the little video camera that had the little tiny tapes that you would put in the big VHS tape. If that don't age you, I don't know what will.
I remember that.
Yes. So I still have an old VCR in the garage that I'd probably have to do the air thing to get it to work. And then I have all those tapes in a duffel bag that so she can look at anytime she wants to, of pictures of us as a family. Nice. And him there. She doesn't pull them out very often anymore. But when she was, I can't remember if she was 8 or 9, she was in a church little play thing. And when she was up on the stage, I noticed that she was blinking a lot. And I thought her allergies must be bothering her really bad. And then, so I started her on some allergy medicine, and I noticed it wasn't getting any better. And then she started doing the whole thing. So I took her to the doctor to check and see if it was allergies, but it was Tourette's. And they said that that was brought on by stress. So it was that fact that she didn't know how to deal with the stuff, and that's where it was coming out. And that got to the point where she would do the little hum thing, clear her throat. She would do the facial thing, and she would do a lot of blinking. And she even went onto medication to kind of calm it down, but she didn't like the way the medication medication made her feel. So we went off the medication, and she just learned that that's what she did. And when people would ask her questions, because it was prevalent enough that some of the kids at school would say, well, why do you keep doing that? Why do you keep blinking? Why do you keep doing that with your nose? Why are you know? And sometimes it would just piss her off, you know. And most of the time she'd say, well, I got allergies, or sometimes she would even say it's Tourette's. And you know, but you know, kids will be kids, you know.
Yeah.
And so sometimes they weren't too kind about it. And so over the years, she will have times that she does really well, and then even today she'll have moments that she will get kind of, you know, antsy, or a little hard to deal with, a kind of thing. And one of the things that was interesting was there was one year in the beginning, she actually wanted to celebrate his birthday by taking balloons and cake to the graveside. So we did that, you know, whatever made her feel better. And then once she didn't want to go to the graveside, we still had to have a birthday cake for him, and we would sing happy birthday to him. And then she got where she didn't want to do that anymore. So I tried to do everything that would support however she needed to deal with things. And one year she didn't mention anything about the anniversary of his death. She didn't mention anything that same year about his birthday. And his birthday was in May. And that year, when she didn't remember the birthday, her grandmother said something about his birthday had been like a week or two before. Well, she was angry at me because I didn't remind her of the birthday. And I said, well, sweetie, I didn't know you would want me to remind you, because I thought maybe you had not wanted to deal with that at the time. And she said, no, I always want to remember, but I just forgot. So I said, if you want me to remind you, I am more than happy to do that. So now if she ever doesn't mention something about her dad on the anniversary of his death or at his birthday, I make sure I mention it to her, even though now she is 29 years old. And most of the time now she says, I remember. And, you know, and that's what it is. And just a couple of days ago, he was on my mind. And she and I were in the car. I think it was even yesterday. And I said, you know, your dad's been on my mind a lot lately. She said, yeah, I've been feeling him around lately. So, you know.
Well, that's interesting that, how old was she when she didn't remember?
Probably about 15.
15. And see, and that's the year, those are the years, the teenage years. Those are the years that, and I don't, you know, I don't have children, but I'm around a lot of kids with different scenarios, whether it's at temple or patients or here or there, whatever. But those are the years that our teenagers tend to want to blame, you know, and look outward and not want to usually take responsibility for certain behaviors, right? And so it's interesting that she was like, well, you have to remind me, which is interesting that, well, how come you didn't remember? Right. So, and it sounds like you were very sensitive to her, and you were like, okay, no problem, I'll remind you. But the question here is, how did you do with the normal aspects of teenagehood, right? Of teenage years? Because your son was already a teenager. It sounds like he was 16. And then she was so young. So how did you handle, number one, his teenage years, and then her teenage years with all this going on?
Okay, well, I'll go back to when Gary died. She was 7 years old. And when he died, remember, it was right before Christmas. Her brownie troop, her school, the classroom, they all made these amazing cards. I still have a little folder with all these amazing cards that these little kids wrote, and some of them are the most hysterical things that you would ever read. But I still have all those. They rallied together. They bought her gifts. You know, they gave me gifts to give her in case it was a financial hardship, which it was. He had no life insurance, no insurance, nothing. So it was, we had a little bit of property. We had to sell property to pay the medical bills and that kind of stuff. So we definitely were not left in a good place. But my son, 16, nobody even acknowledged that had happened, because when I called them and told them that I was going to be coming and picking him up, I told them, I said, his dad's had a heart attack. He's at the hospital. I don't want you to tell him anything because I don't want him to freak out. Just tell him that I'm coming to pick him up. So they knew it was a serious thing. When he went back to school, they never mentioned it. Nobody did anything for him. And he was angry, not only about his dad passing away, but he was angry that everybody thought Haley was important enough at her age to do things for, and that for him, nobody cared. So I had a really tough time with him, and he started getting in a lot of trouble. He even started, since then, he has been in and out of jail and prison and a lot of things. And so he was a challenge even when he was young. But once his dad passed away, it was like he was just so angry about everything. He did not care. And no matter what I said or did, it didn't make any difference. And so that has been his life.
How's he
all
doing
these
now?
years.
How's he doing now?
Well, to be honest with you, he just got out of prison. And none of his prison sentences, most of it's drugs, because that's how he learned to cope, was doing drugs. And then sometimes he would do stupid shit, when he's doing drugs. And then a lot of times his offenses have been the fact that he was out on probation or parole, whatever the hell it is. And he would use, and then he wouldn't go in to report. So then they'd pick him up. That's what he just got out from, was he was actually on the run for a year because he didn't report. That was all it was, is he didn't report. So it was very easy to have avoided that whole scenario, but he didn't. So he's been out a few months now.
Does he live alone, or he lives with you, or?
Ooh, no, he can't live with me.
No.
It's he can be almost like a Jekyll Hyde kind of thing, and I think a lot of times, I don't know how much of that is just him and how much it is the trauma that he went through by his dad dying and all the things but he blames me for everything, Sure. I have no idea. The only connection or speaking or calling that he's done to me is asking for stuff. That's it. And he's a grown man now, and I am not going to continue to be the beating board or whatever the hell you call it.
Enabler.
Yeah, I'm not going to be the enabler, but I'm not going to allow him to speak to me in a bad way and have me upset.
Right.
So he's a grown man. He's got to figure this shit out. So I have two. Of course, there's 9 years difference in them, and I have a very different scenario with them. And for instance, with Haley, when she was, after Gary had died and everything, one of the things that I think in some ways I was an enabler with her, because I felt bad that she didn't have that father, and that, so I would overcompensate because I felt like I was mom and dad, so a lot of times I gave in to things that probably it wasn't in the best interest. And, so she's a little more dependent on me than is probably what I want, but she's getting better about it as we're going in time. Of course, she is 29. She's almost 30 years old. And she lives with me, but she does share with the responsibilities around the house, and and she gives me money toward rent and all that stuff, because that's what she should be doing, because if she wasn't living with me, she'd be doing it all. But when she was in she started doing some cheerleading, and I was a cheer coach, and this was right after he died. Nicholas my son was on the football team. And so I would be with her cheerleading squad because she was just a little kid. So she was actually the mascot, and he would be playing football. Well, he got mad that I was being her coach and not doing that for him. And I said, Nicholas, there's 9 years difference in you. What I can do for her is not the same as what I can do for you. For one thing, if I walked out there and told your football coach that I wanted to be the second chair coach or whatever the hell, they would laugh at me. I don't know enough about football to even do anything like that. And you would not want me out there.
Right.
And so I always felt constantly pulled in both directions.
So, yeah, it sounds like you dealt with a lot of different aspects of this process. And it sounded like Nicholas already had a little bit of difficulty with who he was as a person already. And then, Gary dying didn't help the situation. So
it's like it magnified everything exponentially.
Yeah. So what was the hardest lesson you would say you had to instill in the kids, and also as yourself had to learn as a single parent?
Let's see. That is such a tough and loaded question. Let me see. I think the hardest thing about dealing with the kids is because they were in such different places. There was 9 years difference in them. So it's not like I could have one thing and that would work on for both of them. So I had to be talking to Haley as a young child and talk to him as you're all getting to be more toward the adult age. And so I had sometimes I had a very difficult time figuring that out. And he had a lot of anger issues. And at my worst time, I've never had the same kind of anger issues. So I did not know how to help him with his anger. So, like I said, he was in and out of prison, in and out of jail. And in the beginning, it was just jail, the county jail. And they don't do anything for them. So it was like he spent a lot of time away from me, learning God knows what, from everybody else. And then he would come home and he would be like a different person. And in the beginning, he would be really nice and he would be easy to get along with. And then it would just like, I think I've got mom under my fingers now. And then he would lash out and stuff. So yeah. So I guess the hardest thing was just figuring out what the hell to say and what to do and how to support me in that whole process.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like, you're a tough cookie, and you had these karmic lessons that you had to deal with. But knowing you now, we don't know each other that well, but just knowing what you're up to now, it sounds like you're doing some beautiful work in the world, and you'll keep going and you'll keep doing what you're doing. There's a beautiful book. I don't know if we talked about it. It's called The Myth of Normal by Gabriel Mate. And he's a doctor, but he's also very much into trauma and things like that. He's a trauma expert, and his book is amazing. And so, if you can look it up and, maybe it'll resonate for you. I think it's a great book. It's huge. So it's one of those things,
Yeah.
I don't know how people write these books. I'm writing a tiny little book.
I know.
Taking me God knows how long. And I'm like, how do people do this?
Yeah. One of the books that helped me a lot was called Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. And I cannot remember the author's name, but that helped me to kind of work through things. And I will just share too that I have struggled my whole life with my weight, up and down, sometimes way up, never way down, but always, it would fluctuate a lot. And when, after Gary's I think it was even before his first heart attack. I can't remember. Sometimes time just kind of gets a little weird here,
Yeah, of
but
course.
he was always harping on me about me being fat. That
Mm.
was one of our big things when we split up. It was because everything boiled down to I was fat. Um, and we went to a doctor's appointment, because he always said that it wasn't the fact that I was fat. He was just worried for my health, right? So we go to the doctor, and this is a family doctor. So we both went and had all of our blood work done, and we went jointly together to get the results and everything. And the doctor looked at me and he said, all of your tests come back normal. Everything's great, yada, yada, yada. He didn't even say anything about my weight. And then he looked at Gary, and who was not overweight. He may be 5 pounds at the most, right? And he said, now you, on the other hand, you need some work. And he had high cholesterol. He had low triglycerides. There was just a plethora of things that were going on in him. And so after that, it was like this thing, it was that almost in some way, and this sounds terrible, I felt like I had permission to even eat more, because I was heavy and I didn't have any problems. And then when he passed away, I had gotten quite heavy, and I got even heavier. And all of a sudden, when I really went on this path of becoming a health coach and a life coach and all this stuff, I started with a health coach. And the reason I did was not to help another soul. It was that I knew I needed to do something for me, because if I died, they had nobody.
Mm-hmm.
And I quit. I love to go riding on motorcycles. I completely stopped, because it was like, as soon as I heard of someone that got killed on a motorcycle, suddenly it was like light bulb moment. Holy shit. Every time I get on a motorcycle, I'm potentially taking their only parent away.
Right.
And so I made decisions from that arena, right? And so I decided that I had to change something, because I wasn't having any health issues when I went to the doctor then, but I'd been fat for a while now, and I've done it so many times in my life. I thought, I don't know what I'm working with now, but if I don't do something, it's going to affect my health.
Yeah.
And that's when I went to health coaching school. And the thing was, I thought, I have done this over and over and over again, making a decision, going on a diet, sometimes it was healthy, sometimes it wasn't, but I never could sustain it. And so I was looking for something that would help me sustain it. So this health coaching school, they worked a lot on mindset. They worked on, habit change and those things. And that's what drew me to them. And as I worked on me, then I started seeing this major change in my mindset and how I even looked at life and looked at me. And I would say that was the pivotal moment that my life changed, where I didn't feel like the victim of, this is what's happening in my life. And this is the holy shit thing that I've been handed. I started looking at things as, how can I find the gift in this? How can I rearrange my thoughts so that I do better? And that's when I started changing the way I did things. And I think that's been pivotal, not only for my life, but my clients. And then I think Nicholas, my son, he's not open to any of the help. Right. And my daughter is on a journey of her own now. She is actually working on herself in a totally different way. And she's told me before that she is so grateful that I was there for her and supported her and allowed her to be who she is and make the changes that she needed to make, that I supported her through all of it.
Yeah, I think it's amazing when you have parents that do the work on themselves and they become the example for their children. I will say that Tom, my partner Tom, is that person. When I met him, he was dealing with a situation where his wife was dying of early onset of dementia. And he knew that he was under a lot of pressure, a lot of stress. And at that time, someone had given him the medical medium books. And, medical medium and,
Yeah.
his work with the celery juicing and the organic food and the this and that. So at the time, Tom was like, I can't do this. This is ridiculous. Like, how is this going to really help me? So he really didn't, he didn't connect the dots. But as he was getting sick himself, he was like, okay, I'm going to go to the doctor. I'm going to see what's available. And he did that, but the doctors had no answers. He had all kinds of skin rashes going on, all kinds of things. So he said, you know what, let me revisit this book one more time, because he's an acupuncturist. He does herbal medicine and things like that. And he was like, well, let me look into this book one more time. And when he did, he literally like opened up the page to the page that talked about skin rashes and skin disorders. And it was like a godsend, because he was like, hold up, this is what I have going on. How can this be? And what he found was that he needed to really switch his lifestyle, his diet, and all that. It was too late for the wife, but he knew he needed to get on that. And so the minute he did that, he started to change. He started to see all kinds of changes in him, in his body, in his life. And he has become the example for his children. And, his kids were young, they were, also had to deal with this trauma of their mother at a very young age. And because of Tom, they now live a very healthy lifestyle. So I'm always very impressed and always encourage people that if you want a healthy family, it has to start with you. The parents have to do the work first. You cannot, you cannot just be like, okay, my kids will figure it out or whatever. No, we, the parents, have to do the work, right? So they're looking to us. They're looking to us as models. And so, and it's never too late. I don't believe in that, being a certain age or it's too late. So I really admire that you did that. And I think that, I don't know, but I have a feeling that at some point your son will come around and he will realize, what's going on. And your daughter, it sounds like it's amazing things going on there. So that's wonderful.
Yes. And we get along great. We, even though we live together and everything, we still spend a lot of time together doing things. And it's just wonderful. It's like having another best friend, So to me, having children, if you can have that kind of relationship, especially when they get older, then they're another friend, and it's not just someone that you're raising, and when you can get to that place, it's really, really nice. And we give ourselves space and everything too. Like this week, she is actually house sitting for some friends, so she's not here for a week. And so we do really well with giving each other plenty of space and not being on top of each other and everything.
So what would be one final thought that you could share with parents about, I know that not everyone obviously going to have an experience like this, and I think that people that do experience these kinds of things with death and, that sort of stuff is very, very high level. It's like we always say that the elites are, only the special souls come down, to Earth School. And so, so when you're dealing with death, you definitely are at a very special level to be able to deal with that at Earth School. So what would you say to parents, just in general? Let's just do a broad brush, no matter what the circumstance. What would you say? What would you leave parents with? Single parent, mom, dad? What's the one very important lesson?
Well, I would say one of the really important lessons, in my opinion, is that no matter where you are, what your age your kids are, when you become a single parent, that the best way to parent them is using your intuition and caring for yourself. And because it's kind of like the oxygen mask thing on the plane, if you don't put the oxygen mask on, you can't help the other people. And our kids are always looking to us, even if they don't appear to be. And so they're following your lead. And if you are a person that is all the time learning, they'll learn. If you're a reader, they will read. If you're very angry, they'll be angry. If you're, there's so many different ways that they mimic us in life as they get older. Not intentionally, it's just one of the things that they do. So to me, it's as long as you're caring for your spirit, your soul, your body, and they can see that, then I think pretty much everything's going to work into the best way.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So I would love to have you on, for a second time where we can talk more about your work, actually. And we can really dive into, because this topic was so big and so special. And I didn't want to veer off into a different segment, because I really wanted to dive deep and let you just do your thing and let you have that experience. And maybe you had some healing here on this call also, and inspired some other people as well. So I would love to have you on again, where we could just dive into your work and how you're helping people on that aspect.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Do we have just a minute where I can share something?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
I didn't know where we are on the time frame, but I don't know if you remember, I mentioned that I've been a single parent twice. My first marriage was where my son came from, was my first marriage. And I think the reason I want to share this is to
take your time, don't worry.
Okay. To remind people, basically women, that when you're pregnant, everything you're going through or you're doing affects the baby, right? So when I was 8 months pregnant, my husband decided that he didn't want to be married to me anymore. And so we split up when I was 8 months pregnant. And things weren't great before that. I didn't realize that, but they weren't. And so I had a lot of stress. He had an affair. I found out about it. And then once I said something to him about it, it was done. It all culminated around a Thanksgiving dinner. That's when I found out. And, so it was a lot of stuff going on right then. And I don't want to go into the whole thing, but so when I went to the gynecologist for my checkup after this had happened, he told me, he said, you're going to be okay. And he said, I want you to know that when something like this happens, sometimes it's for the best. And I remember thinking, how the hell is this for the best? I thought the sun rose and set at this man's feet. I thought he was wonderful. And so I was very blindsided with the whole thing. And he said, he was explaining to me that as much as I could, I needed to be calm. I needed to be as relaxed as I could, to have family around me, whatever. He said, just because somebody was the sperm donor doesn't mean they would be a good father. And he said, so just remember that. And my son, like I said, was a challenge from the day he was born. I had a very stressful pregnancy, and then my delivery was very hard. I had an emergency C-section. So there's all these different things going on. And I knew later, as I researched a lot of different things, that it's the things that are going on in my mind and in my body when I'm pregnant, those affect the baby. So does this traumatic, almost near death delivery. Mm-hmm. And so I don't really know what the answer is to, how I could have done anything any different. Or maybe like, we talked about when the soul comes in and they're at the bus stop and it's like, I got to deal with this and I got to deal with that. That's obviously was his journey to be dealing with all the stuff he is, but there are times that I will ponder on, how could I deal with that kind of stress in a way that it wouldn't have been so traumatic? How could I, do something that might have made the delivery a little bit different? So I guess it's that we as parents, we have an obligation from before we get pregnant to be, eating healthy and doing all those things, which I did not do. It was a surprise pregnancy. And so I guess the thing that I'm wanting, and I know I'm just all over the friggin' place here.
No, you're good.
But it just feels important to say,
yes,
that anybody that is wanting to have a child, whether you're having to do it naturally or artificially or whatever it is your almost duty, I think, to begin eating in a way that supports your body in a whole different way, which also helps your mind. It helps everything. And then doing that throughout the pregnancy. And I will say, one of the things that I've said so many times is that I thank God when that man left me that I was pregnant, because like I said, I thought the sun rose and set at that man's feet. He was my whole life. And when he left, I think I would have fallen apart. I don't know what I would have done, but the fact that I was pregnant, I thought, okay, I've got to keep eating. I've got to keep doing things to nourish me. Now, granted, I probably didn't nourish in the right way, but I was eating. And so I think it's important for me to share this so that people can think, maybe he wouldn't have had all the issues that he had. I have no idea. If I had been better about eating, if I had been better about learning a way to handle the stress. And what I did was I just cried and I buried it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, of course. And I will tell you that, look, you can only do the best you can. You know what I mean? We only have what we have at the time we have it.
Yes.
So you did the best you could with what you had, and you're dealing with a situation where your husband is like, well, number one, it's one thing if you're happily married and you're just being gluttony because you're just being gluttony, right? But you're dealing with a man who's saying, okay, I'm done with this marriage thing. I'm out of here. So not only are you dealing with that stress, now you're pregnant. And I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot to deal with. And any normal person would have probably done what you did. And so I will say that, you sound like an extraordinary person to have overcome all that. And, at least you are doing it now, right? At least you're doing it now and you're working through it now. And the truth is that your son at some point, hopefully, will wake up and realize that he can't blame mommy forever. At some point, it's his responsibility to excuse my French, grow the F up, know. And we've all had trauma. We've all have, things that are difficult and unspeakable. And, welcome to Earth School. We all agree there's no victims here. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
From the people that, and I hope not to make any enemies, but, from the people that get beat up, battered, and wives that are battered, to husbands that get cheated on, to whatever, to child abuse, to nobody is a victim. We've all made a soul agreement to be here. So, if we believe that, great. And if we don't believe that, great. I don't know what else to tell you. That is my belief system. So, and even if I always say, even if it's false and it's just something we all made up, fine.
It's still yours, right?
It's still mine. It makes me feel better and it helps me get through life every day. So I'm sticking to it. And the truth is that nobody's a victim here. And so we all have to do what we have to do. So,
Right.
you know, blaming yourself is not gonna work. You know, there's no point to it.
Right. Right.
So,
And I do try not to blame myself.
yeah.
And I guess my point of telling the whole thing was to, I don't know, to be honest with you.
No,
I
no.
guess
And
it's,
I hope I didn't mean it that way. I'm
oh,
sorry.
no, 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 no. It's, it's just like I said, the, the guest I had that had the multiple personalities, she felt telling her story helped her and helped someone else.
Yes.
And so, damn it, I hate to cry.
No, I'm glad that you shared your story, and
Ah,
thank you. Thank you for sharing all that, honestly. Thank you for
yeah.
sharing all that. It's very, very powerful.
But maybe somebody
Yeah.
will, if they face anything, even not even as big or even bigger, it might trigger something to, let me deal with this shit
Yeah.
instead of burying my head. Because I think I would be much further along with it today if I had. But I know my journey is my journey is my journey is my journey, and so I accept that and I become better for it. But maybe something I said will help somebody else.
So thank you so much, Vicky. That was a very inspiring conversation. And like I said before, I'm so grateful, that you are such a special one that's in the world doing important work, and you're sharing your process with us. And your kids, even though there's certain stuff going on at the moment, I'm sure that your kids on a very deep level, I'm sure your daughter's there, but your son, he knows on a deeper level where you're at, and that it could be just that he's feeling like he's disappointing you also.
Maybe.
He might be angry at himself because he's just a big disappointment at the moment. But I think if you hold space and just love him, but tough love, right? Tough love.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he'll come around, I think.
Oh, thank you for that. That's my prayer all the time, that the best thing that could ever happen with him is that he lives an amazing life and he's happy. That's all I want for him.
Yeah.
That's all I want for both of them.
Of course, of course.
And me too.
Yeah, hello, of course. You get to play a little bit, right?
That's right. That's right.
So thank you for this conversation. And I know that it's gonna, hopefully it'll help a lot of single parents out there. And thank you again for all the work that you're doing. And we'll have you back on to really talk about your work and how you're serving humanity with that aspect of your life.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you having me today.
Thank you so much. So as always, guys, when you know and understand yourself, the world will know and understand you too. And remember, what's the best that can happen? Okay, thank you so much, Vicky, for being with us today. And till next time, guys, we'll see you on the next episode. And keep being amazing.
Yes.
All right. Take care.